Hi, everyone.
We're waiting on Dan.
Sounds good. Thanks. How bad is the lighting behind me? I don't think I have anything else I can pull over those windows.
You look good, Sarah. There's good lighting. Sorry. I did. I shut it off, but she can't hear me now because
I just,
oh. Down in 3-4 hours.
good afternoon and welcome to the town of Orono, the Orono Town Council. Good afternoon and welcome to the Orono Town Council, March 31st, 2025, Capital Improvement Plan Workshop. Is that the appropriate term? We have one item on our agenda this evening, and that's to have a presentation of the Capital Improvement Plan. Clint and I talked about it a little bit before. I'd like to move through it in sections and save our questions till the end of the section presentation, if that makes sense to people, so we can kind of collect them all up and ask them at one time, as opposed to having a back and forth dialogue during the course of the information sharing. So with that, Clint, you want to take us away?
Right. Yeah. So thank you. So what I'm going to do is, I think the easiest way for everybody at home is I'm going to share the capital improvement that's on our website in draft, and then we can kind of work through the different pieces on what we're changing. So let me bring that up.
I forgot to do roll call. So roll call shows it. Unfortunately, sorry about that, but we've got Councilor Baker, Councilor Powers, Councilor Kenny, Councilor Demerit, Councilor Hardison, and Councilor Marks online, and Councilor Larway is not with us at this moment. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Okay, so as I said, this is the draft, and the way that I'm presenting this is that it's going to stay in draft till the council will adopt the plan for the year. At the point of adoption, the 1-year numbers for fiscal year 26 will migrate into the budget that's presented end of April, beginning of May. So that's kind of the way it's a little bit different. But again, we took a very direct reading of the charter that said that the capital plan is presented before your annual budget. So we're literally presenting it before the annual budget. It works with my philosophy because, again, it is a capital improvement plan. A plan is not something you actually have to fund. It's what your hopes and your aspirations are. It's your goals to meet the needs. So that's the way the staff approached it. What do we need? What do we own? What do we have for assets? came up with different policy directions on what you could do and how you could take it. And so then we moved through it, and then when you adopt this as the plan for the year, we would set that as the number for the budget. But again, the council can amend the budget in the budget processes because we feel that taxes should be kept lower, or we have more capacity, we could put things back in. It could go either way.
Can I, yeah, because I was having a question with that, because I think the schedule says to adopt it next meeting, correct?
14th.
14th.
Yep.
And, and you just said that will migrate the 1-year funding into the budget.
Yep.
Into the budget for discussion.
Yep.
Is that
Yep.
a safe statement?
Yeah. So if you want to work with tonight's workshops about what in the plan you'd like to question, change, adjust, increase, decrease, we could do some things like that here. But if it's really into this year, what's it going to do to taxes in fiscal year 26 that we're proposing? That's not what this is about. This is about a 5-year plan and beyond for this town and what we should or shouldn't do. It sets some policy directions that we'll talk about. But again, this is more of, is this a good plan to maintain the assets we've invested in? And that's like I said, that's how the staff approached it. There's different terms we'll hear. One thing is what we capitalize, and I talk about that in the very first part of the presentation. That for accounting purposes, we capitalize anything over $5,000. That does not necessarily mean it's in the capital plan, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this. But what we're trying to do is really focus. Capital plan is the items that you can't work into your normal operating budget or shouldn't work into your normal operating budget because they're of such large cost and of long lives. So again, in the preparation, again, section 1 is all about how we develop this. Each department presents a budget to me. That budget was then taken for capital improvement needs for the next 5 years. This year, I asked them to go further out, try to see what else they could see. And I took all those requests and I started building spreadsheets. And we're going to talk a little bit more as I do the other ones, but those became into different versions, different hypotheticals, what we could afford, what we couldn't, what was happening in different years. And I'm going to share some of those as we move along. But what it really came down to is the final fiscal year 26, what we're recommending for funding. And that's a spreadsheet. It's Appendix C, and we'll talk about that when we get further along as well.
Can I just jump in? Sorry. I did spend a lot of
Took 3
time
minutes.
reading this. And that was
Yeah.
one of the questions I had. What does that even mean when you say we're going to capitalize over 5,000? So, and you just touched on it. When will you kind of clarify what that means? Because
What it means is this simply: anything that we buy that's worth more than $5,000, we have to give a report to our auditors, and it's capitalized, becomes part of a capital listing. That's part of your annual audit.
so that's
I-
nothing to do with how it's funded then. It
Correct.
may still come out of the operating budget.
Correct.
That's what I was not clear to
Yep.
me.
Capitalization is an accounting principle, not a how you pay for it principle.
All right. How long is this first section?
Another 5 minutes at
All right,
most.
let's get 5 minutes, then we'll ask questions when you're done with let's
Yep.
try not to interrupt him for 5
Okay.
minutes.
So the next section, a lot of the data and appendices, when you go into those, you'll see them. Appendix A is all the departmental requests. That's exactly what I received. Appendix B is a large spreadsheet. I overshared for transparency purposes, but Appendix B it shows the problem because there's so much that we're trying to sustain through our capital improvement plan that I wanted to show how cumbersome it could be. From Appendix B, I built a lot of variations. They're not in there. It just became too hard to share, and it was too much information. It was going to create greater confusion. That leads to Appendix C. That's the 1-year plan and recommendation for implementation for this year's budget. Appendix D is a lot of information regarding your TIFs. Appendix E is a remodeled debt summary for the town, and that's all your appendices. The next section in here is I talked about the vision and the goals. I'm not going to go through them all, but for the vision, and again, people could have read it, but this is the vision right there at the top of this page that I'm coming up with. And the fiscal year 26 plan serves as a pivotal bridge, advancing prior efforts to improve understanding, integrate our goals with the operational needs. And then I took that statement and turned it into 5 goals. And the goals I have right here is to get a long-term vision beyond 5 years, consider the council goals and integrate them into the capital improvement plan, promote ideas and leverage the funding opportunities, which for this is going to be talking a lot about TIF and bonding, Try to do this as transparently as possible so the community understands the complexity of the number of assets that we're maintaining through a capital improvement plan. And then the last goal I had is that I'd like to talk before we're done. One of the goals is investing in software. This has become very cumbersome and time consuming, and Excels are extremely great for staff to use, but they don't always create the most understandable, transparent documents for a community to see and review. So, and we'll talk about that as we go through. We've updated all our outstanding debt and we're following state statute. The state valuation for Orono was 645,550. That's state value, not our tax commitment values. And under state law, we're allowed to borrow 7.5% of that. We currently only owe 10,236,000. So we're well under the 48 million. That does not account schools, sewers, and some other projects. So we're under our debt capacity. I would not recommend going to the cap of 48 million at all. But again, it's a number to be aware of as you're going through, and I want to make sure people saw that. Appendix E is the debt summary, and I'm not going to click on that right now, but the council's given a lot of direction I heard last year. I've actually met with all of you this year, and I met with all the staff. The new debt summary outlines everything you borrowed, what you intended it for, if it was refinanced, when you borrowed it, when it's coming due, what your annual payments are, principal and interest, through the life of them. So it's a really good, simple summary, and you can click on this link. But I wasn't going to do that as part of this presentation. The other one I wanted to do is we did put the current finances. This is a document that shows our unassigned fund balance. Just shows you the growth of the town and how we've been doing very well. We'll talk more about this in the budget, but you should have anywhere from 3 to 6 months of your operating expenses set aside in unassigned fund balance so that you can meet the cash flow needs of the town. We are at or over that amount, so we're in a good place to be. And then the last one is I did click a link in here on page 7, and I highly recommend public and council take a look at this. It is it's all the things that the GFOA tells you what you should be looking at when you build a capital plan. So this is something staff's very knowledgeable about, but if any community member wants to better understand what drives a capital improvement plan process and why we do them, there's some great philosophy behind there. So then I came into page 7 and 8, list out, I think it's 16 specific items that are happening in this budget and how we do them. I want to get into those as we go down later on. I'm almost done with this section. The 5-year plan is in a narrative. So you've seen these as numbers in the past. It was too hard and too detailed. We didn't have enough time to transition everything from the 1-year plan into a 5-year plan, and that's going to be a goal. You'd still have the intent and what we expect to do and the constraints we want to live on. But again, to say that there is a detailed, itemized 5-year plan, I would not make that statement. There is a detailed narrative on how to accomplish those goals. And the WPCF is separate. On the bottom of page 9 and into 10 is the 1-year itemized lists of each of the 5-year items. And I think this is where I'm going to stop when I get to fiscal year 30. And we're at reserve. So that's the end of the intro, what's in here and what we tried to provide and explain.
Okay, are there any questions about the intro or process from here?
I have one.
Council Marks.
Hi, sorry to be on a screen. Nice to see you all. And first of all, thank you so much, Clint and staff. This is an amazing piece of work, and I'm really so happy that we're doing this process. Clint, had a question on page 6, where you're talking about debt levels. Thanks for scrolling. Whoever's doing that. I wanted to take a look at, I understand the a little higher up, that paragraph, one more up, the 7.5% being the maximum amount that we are allowed to bond out. We're way, way below that. My question to you, Clint, and to staff is, we've been told before as a council that in addition to this maximum amount that we're allowed to bond out, that there is a level of indebtedness that is ideal to keep us in an A+ bond rating as a town. And I'm aware that we are going to be looking at needing to take out some bonds. So I guess I'm curious, is that a figure you can also provide for us either now or in the future, as opposed to simply where we're at now and the max we could be at? at what point, what percent level here would we be moving out of the top bond rating level where we would really like to stay? Does that make sense as a question?
I think so. I mean, I heard it in two parts. Where's our current bond rating and what are the other levels that we can achieve? And again, the one question that I don't think this capital plan could answer, but if we ever go to a bond advisors, what would the additional debt do to our bond rating?
Mhm.
It's not just that one number that's going to move it. It's a variety of other things on our ability to raise taxes, meet our bills, and what our cash flows are. But I can get some detailed summaries as long as we know that it's the art or science of them going through and doing that actual bond rating. And that's issued out to multiple rating agencies. I believe it's Standard and Poor's and I'm gonna blank on the other one off the top of my head. There's two rating agencies they send it out to, and they come back and tell us based upon our past 5-year financial statements or audits, how we fare out.
If
I
that
can
would be
get you the-
possible, if, sorry.
Okay.
I have a lag sometimes, apologies. I just wanted to say if something would be possible, I think those guidelines are just important for us to keep in mind as a council as well, since we definitely want to stay in the highest bond rating possible for us. So I would appreciate that. I had one other question on page 9, but I'm happy to cede to others in the meantime.
Go ahead, Sarah, then Jacob, you have one?
I think it's on 9. Someone's still scrolling and I'm watching as the scrolling is happening. When we get to the part where we're going year by year, I think it was just before
Okay.
that. Okay. Yeah, here. And I'm pretty sure this is answered elsewhere in the capital plan, Clint, but I just wanted to be sure. As you're moving in year to year here and recommending the close to 1.7 million toward capital each year out of the operating taxes collected, there is an inflation adjustment for that, correct? It shows up later in the document. So you're not actually recommending the 1,667,035. You're recommending that be adjusted each year for inflation as it moves into the coming 4 years, correct?
Actually, for the 5-year plan in front of you today, we stayed away from an inflationary recommendation and said
Okay.
we would try to make it work for the next 5 years. So we did not do that. Again, the variable will be is if inflation's at an extreme high rate of growth, that would probably be problematic. But I thought for now, if we could stabilize just the number at 1.667 for a few years, that's probably even better in the town's interest to try to set that goal and maintain it.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Councilor Baker?
So, what's this matter? So I echo what Sarah said. Talking about things in terms of ratios and metrics is more helpful than just total dollar amounts. So, hearing that 3 to 6 months of unassigned funds, that to me is more helpful than, we've got $7 million in cash. But then also, looking at our and again, you and I have talked about this. I'm assuming that, there's certain leverage ratios that we want to make sure that we don't exceed. Here's what the industry average is for towns of our size. So getting a better understanding of where we are in comparison to, in the private world, it's called the industry average. So, compared to municipalities our size. So that's one statement / questions. And then on the reserves, there are a lot of reserve accounts here. Are all of these active? And by that, I mean,
Have we
is
done
there a
reserves
way-
yet? Are we on the reserves yet?
Oh, I thought that was part
Next
of it.
section.
Next section.
Oh, we're
Yep.
not there yet? Okay, never mind.
Nope. So okay, we'll wait.
And then I have a question. The valuation, the 645 million, is that taxable property or does that include the university and other things that aren't taxable?
That is the state valuation of taxable properties, not including what's in a TIF district or, I'm trying to think if there's anything, what else is limited out? That would be the big one. And anything in a TIF district's been removed.
Okay, but the university would be,
The university above and beyond, that's
Yep.
coming out in the budget. We've got some of the statistics off the state website. I can give you top of the head that the valuation, we tell them that we're estimating because we don't really value it.
Yep.
But we give a rough estimate on square foot. It's about 370 million.
okay. Great, thank you.
Remembered as I'm going. You talk about, spending X amount on equipment, X amount on roads, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess I'd just be interested to know and understand, is that feasible or what do other towns do? And for example, when I'm looking at a development project or something, I will typically factor in 10% of revenues that should go into, capital expenditures, knowing that you've got to, eventually replace a roof, replace the sewer, or at least save for it. So I'm assuming that municipal finance is the same way, in that, we've got X miles of roads. It's cost us this much it's worth is this
Mhm.
to ensure that, we're appropriately either spending or reserving to maintain our capital assets.
We got some of that
Does that
coming
make
up.
sense? Okay.
So yeah, that's a good question though.
Okay.
So I'll go back to the page 6 piece about the 7.5%, which would be 48 million. Would you, I mean, I feel like we should also, when we talk about the town's commitment and what we would bond, and we look at the totals, I feel like we have to be looking at what the school, because ultimately the town's on the hook for that, what they've bonded, what that amount is. Also with WPCF, that's held separate and it's looked at as like a separate entity, but I would like to see and you put in here we're around 10 million or something,
Yep.
I think, right? That's just
Municipal.
the town's portion. I'd like to see the full picture showing WPCF, what WPCF is at, what the town is at, what the school is at. Presumably the school is not going out for more bonds. I know. They'd have to go through a vote and all of that stuff. We don't, but I'd like to see the total, and then and just from reading in here, it seems like we're talking about 6 million for the town. It seems like we're talking about 6 million for WPCF. So we go from 10 up to 22,
Correct.
not counting school. So seems like we're approaching a pretty high level. Again, not knowing exactly what's coming off and when it's coming off, but I think that we have to look at that full picture and include school, WPCF, both where we're at, and then as we talk about what we're looking to bond, how that adds to everything.
So WPCF's in that section. We talk about what that does to
That's
your
part of
bonds.
the 10?
This is part of our presentation. When
No,
we
but the
get to
10 you said
WPCF
we
and
have,
bonding, we talk about it.
you said we're at 10 right now.
If
Does
you
that
look at the
include-
debt page, WPCF's at the bottom. It tells you how much of it's for sewer purposes, and that's included. I didn't carve it out, but I can get you this individual number just for that as well, for just WPCF, and we can provide that. But again, that's not included as part of the municipal side because it's not tax dollars that goes to it. It's ratepayer fees. And then again, the school, that's a different philosophy. If we're going to go down that road, that's a next year goal because that's a big one.
Well, I think personally that if we're talking about bonding, which we are, we really should be looking at the full picture. I don't know if it's down a different road or not. It still is the Orono taxpayers that are on the hook for that bond money. So
Clint?
But again, it's taxes that are funded by the school and
Yep.
it's in dollars set by the school. So that's a different dialogue.
Clint?
Yeah, hold on a second, Sarah. Please, thank you. I think it'd be helpful to kind of bucket some of these questions in terms of like, what's a clarifying question, in terms of the document in front of us? What is a nice to know as at some point, we have between now and April, is it 13th or 14th?
Yep.
So clarifying questions, like just as we're going through this document so we understand it better. Things that are nice to know at the appropriate time, when we start thinking about bonds and things like that. And then if there are deficiencies that we find with this plan as presented that could keep somebody from voting against it. So I don't want to burden staff over the next 2 weeks. Council, we can all ask for what we want to ask for, but for me, I think about it as terms of not burdening staff with a rewrite of this thing before we approve it, understanding that we're also going to have the budget process kick off right after that. So I guess I would just frame my thinking on that. But Sarah, you had a question?
It was just a follow-up actually to Leo's question. Clint, like I actually was just curious, without staff needing to provide us with more data and more figures or any of that, but just, is it correct that our bond rating, when that happens and we work with our bond agent, that they do take into consideration not just the amount of outstanding bonds that the town already holds, but also the amount that the school system already holds? I know it was true for the schools that when they did their bonding, it mattered not just any previous bonds the schools had, but also it mattered how much was held on the town side. Is that true in reverse? Does that affect how our bond rating is, how much the school has bonded out?
My understanding for bond rating is that as long as you're not looking at sewer bonds, because that'll be looking at your
Yeah.
rates and your sewer rates, but if you're looking at anything that's paid or refunded through property taxes, yes, it would.
Yeah.
It's just hard to, it's two approval processes. So
Understood. I just do
I
think
can
it's
get you the
important
numbers.
for,
Yep.
yeah, I just think it's generally important for council to understand that the bond rating does take both of those into account. Whether there's more numbers you need to provide or not, the general concept is probably important for us to understand. Thank you.
We can do as an appendix. So,
Okay.
yep. Okay.
So next reserves section, how long do you think it'll be?
I wasn't doing them this way when I did the drafts of
sorry.
this, but reserves will be probably one of the quickest because
Okay.
it's just a simple explanation. There's a couple questions I want to go through it, but what we did this year is we took the listings that you've been given, kind of an Excel list, and we kind of come up with the first draft at definitions that tie to the numbers. So you now know what those are and the reason we hold them and some of the staff recommendations of what some goals would be. So to start right off the bat, the first one's interest on reserves. That reserve is all the interest our reserve accounts make. It goes into one account. Staff's recommending $250,000 to be not a cap, but as an amount that you should try not to exceed as the balance in that at any one time. So start transferring things out. Once it gets to $250,000, you should start designating it because interest on reserves has no purpose. It should be transferred to another reserve so that it can be used for other purposes. It's not there for a specific reason, just holding it. And then, and make sure you got at least 50,000 in there at all times. I think that's just a good financial concept. You can't use it for property tax reduction. It's a reserve fund. Very ill-advised, bad prudence. You set money aside in reserves and designate it. Then you make interest off it, and then you take the interest off you earn that to lowering taxes. Some people would consider that's a little unethical. It's kind of like a beginning of arbitrage. If you borrow money, you can't use the interest on arbitrage to pay down your operating costs. I would not recommend using reserve interest. You're underfunding reserves. So we should continue to keep the reserves in there until they're adequately funded. And I would not recommend doing it for a tax rate reduction. You could transfer it to a project that is an operating budget related thing, but it should be a very specific project. Not, oh, we're going to lower taxes. Let's take $100,000. It should be more of, no, let's take 50 grand out and buy our salt with it this year and not have salt in the operating budget. You have a reason why you're doing it. Okay. So we'll keep going. I know that's going to be some questions. We can come back. The rest, I'm not going to go through them all, but I do like have some questions as we go through. You have your unemployment, landfill closure, explain what it's there for and where it came from. You're going to close a landfill in 2042. The goal is to have $250,000 there by 2042. Winter maintenance reserve is always having bad winters still may happen. Having some there just in case will prevent it from being an overrun in your operating budgets. So your capital infrastructure reserve, this is the money. So you're going to have a capital infrastructure budget this year for roads. What you don't spend goes into reserves if you save money. So if you say it's going to be $250,000 to pave a road and we do it for 200, the balance at year end will go into reserves. And then that's where it's held for future. That's why last year you had $1 million built up because over the past 5-10 years, the net of all your projects had money left over. It sat there. You were able to fund some infrastructure with it. Similar with capital equipment, you will see in the listings, 290,000 is specifically designated, but 144 had no specific designated purpose in there in your capital equipment reserve. We could designate those, but that's an entire process of itself. And the staff could come up with a recommendation if that's something the council wanted to see. Capital facilities. This is what you have to maintain all your buildings. So if a roof goes bad or a sewer goes, a furnace blows up or an HVAC system needs to be replaced, you have 161,000 in there. 14. Yep. So currently you've got playground maintenance, a new playground, the old fire station is in there at 11,000. I'm going to recommend you either pay your whatever transfer costs we have this year should come out of that. And then whatever's less should be redesignated to something else. If you're going to end up selling it or giving it to the Boy Scouts. It's no sense to have a reserve on a building we don't own. Marden Park Rec Complex is in there for 50 grand, and a pool youth play area for 60,000. Those are prior things that you set money, council set it aside for. You have your council special projects, it's 4,600 left in there. Just telling you, your major maintenance, safety equipment reserve, there's 11,000. Staff and I just couldn't spend the time to get a really good defined purpose for it. It's there for safety equipment, mainly police fire, but again, could have some other purposes. SCA CBA bottle reserve. The goal is to start saving up half of the purchase price every 10 years so that you're only paying for half the year you go to buy it. We could do more, but it's going to require some sacrifices to get to that model, so you would not have any out-of-pocket costs the year you buy it. Skate park fund, the 113400 was a donor fund, so you have to hold that. That's my recommendation there. Or you'd have to try do some work on who made the donations and tell them why you didn't use their donation to build a skate park. I'm giving a staff recommendation on the council designated. You have a lot of projects this year. Yeah, and Emerald Ash Borer is one that's being requested by staff, as well as a strategic development reserve. It may make sense to transfer it out. There's no plans for a skate park, nor is there anywhere to put it. There's a whole process there. If you want to just keep saving money for one, we can leave it there, but there was a staff opportunity we wanted to share. Rec reserves, cemetery reserves, those are for larger projects in your cemeteries. Police tuition, professional development. I'm just going to keep going. Library construction. I think this should be moved to maintenance. You're about to bond a library construction, so you don't need a reserve. Employee benefit reserve, we think is adequately funded and should be there. There's your library maintenance. The public works maintenance reserve. And again, these are at low levels. This is at $100,000. We're recommending 10% of the insured value should be a reserve budget. That would prevent the need to bond major investments on them, like HVACs, roofs, sidings, etc. But that's just a recommendation. The ambulance reserve, we'll talk a little bit more later, but our goal is to save up $400,000 every 4 years. And you would buy an ambulance every 4 years. You have two. That's an 8-year replacement schedule, which is very advisable. There may be opportunities in the future, but that's the plan. I'm going to get a little personality in here if you don't mind. The next one's your fire truck reserve. It has right now we have 3 fire trucks we need to purchase in the next 10, 15 years, 2 engines and a ladder. They have a total today purchase price of around $4.5 million. Good news, you saved up $198. So we only need $4,449,000. You don't need a fire truck reserve. You're going to bond them. So unless you're really going to change our philosophies, you haven't been doing this for years. That decision was made before you. It's just throwing that out there as an observation. You really don't have a fire truck reserve. If you want one, you can have one, but at this point, you're going to need to buy a ladder truck in the next few years, and you're going to have to bond it to do it because I don't think you can save enough money up without increases to taxes, but that's up to you. I'm going to Sally Jacobs sculpture. You got a reserve for the sculpture. Union Street boat launch. This might become a public parks reserve because I think you guys, and this could be broken into multiple parks, but I hear more conversations about improving parks rather than just the Union Street boat launch. Something to think about. FEMA post-perk solid waste reserve. That's money that was set aside to manage the tipping fees for the community. We didn't need it this year. So we hold it in case there's solid waste or trash pickup has a need that we don't have the funds in the operating budget for. It's not a bad thing to have. Penobscot Nation Culture Project. That's the amount that's unencumbered, 19,825. But we still have an unknown cost for the signs we're going to buy. We got to get those quoted once they're designed. And then there's the 2 we recommend we create. One for Emerald Ash Borer and the other one for strategic development. This would be non-TIF strategic development. You start thinking about this as if you wanted to do some planning for streets, or if you wanted to do some planning for water sewer expansions, planning for designs of a park, planning for designs of a airport. A little personality there again, but you could do those things. And then the water pollution has 4, and I gave you the balances of those. So you can see what theirs are. The one for this year is their capital infrastructure reserve has just over 300,000 plus what's contributed for this year. And that is we'll see it when we come to wastewater. They're doing we're upgrading something with it. It's recommended in their budget to pay for it this year. Can't tell you it off the top of my head, but there's one in there. That's to
Okay.
be spent this year in the capital improvement plan.
And those are on page 18 for those following along.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's the reserves. It's just an attempt to define everything and give you some goals. I think this is a project at some point for the council to really dive in harder and say what they want them to be, but I would not recommend it for this year.
Any questions?
I
Councilor
I have a
Powers?
question that goes back on page 8. So all these but it has to do with the reserves, and it was I think the question 6, and I was curious what your thoughts were in terms of like we have the capital infrastructure plan as one thing, and now we also have all of these reserve budgets that go to capital planning, and so these reserve budgets, they come out of our just yearly budget, right? But they are for capital infrastructure
Typically, you take
planning.
tax dollars and you put so much a year into your reserves for those
Okay.
purposes. Sometimes you get a check, like Park gave you a check when they closed it. So you had money that came from an outside source, but you designated it for that purpose. You might sell land and you would, rather than putting it into your operating budget, you would say, we're just going to designate it straight to reserves. But yes, I would say with 90% accuracy, the money that's in your capital reserves came
Yeah.
from a tax,
Okay.
raising tax dollars to put it in there. So that's what we're moving towards, is that there's, the capital reserve, capital infrastructure, capital equipment. How do you fund these? What are you putting in each
Okay.
year? And where does that money come from?
And so these reserves are part of the capital infrastructure plan. They're not necessarily
They are.
in
And
the,
so
ye- but they're part of the yearly budget too, right?
Yeah,
And
and
this
you're-
is that, like, how does this look? And what's your thoughts on how this?
You got
is
1 foot
teased
in and
out?
1 foot out.
Okay.
You haven't made a commitment to reserve funding 100% with clarity to me and staff. You also
Gotcha,
haven't made
right.
100%
Okay, that
commitment to
makes-
bonding.
Gotcha.
And you haven't made a 100% commitment to what you're going to spend on an annual basis. This is my attempt this year to set a number
Gotcha.
that we think
Okay.
you could commit to.
Yeah.
And then staff's going to start figuring out how to balance it and
Right.
build that plan over the next few years.
Okay, that makes more sense. And so, but I think in the future, right,
Mhm.
these are all like, we can say we're going to fund this or not, and that's why it's still in the capital infrastructure plan. Okay, got it. All right.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So, yep, we good?
Jacob has a question, and then I see Sarah, you're online, but Jacob, we'll come to you after Jacob. Yeah, Jacob.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, the question that I started to ask, and then I think you answered, is there are some of these reserve accounts that you recommend we don't need
Correct.
anymore. So I appreciate as part of your recommendations as to where those funds should be moved to, because in my mind, reserve accounts are to either save for a future purpose so that we don't have to bond it or pull it out of operations, or to mitigate volatility. So, we have a really bad winter and salt prices go up. So I appreciate the recommendations about it shouldn't exceed 50%, et cetera, et cetera. Going back to the interest on reserves, and because I'm sure you saw me making faces as you were talking about that, trying to understand it. So reserve interest is not to be utilized for property tax reduction. However, from what you were saying is, let's say that we build the balance up to 300,000 because there's a lot of interest there. We could then take that 50,000, because we've set a 250 threshold, and instead of use that to fund a project or a portion of operations, instead of letting that flow through to the mill rate. So, I mean, indirectly, we're using it to lower property taxes. We're just doing it through, I guess, in my mind, in an indirect method.
So, and again, some of this, you're going to see that I did a few things just for the sheer, to build this understanding. There are 2 projects quote unquote, that are recommended in this capital plan for fiscal year 26 to use capital interest reserves. And those are to buy software for a 1-year license for the town to try them, see if we like them. So what I said is let's buy them in this one. If we're liking them, it's not an increase to property taxpayers. It gives us another year to build that in to taxes, but we'll do it for a 1-year trial. So I did that very intentionally with staff so that you could see how we would do this. But we're not just saying, let's lower taxes by 50 grand. We're going to move 50 grand into revenues and we're just going to lower the property taxes. That just didn't seem as right. I prefer to have the designated use. So if you were to say, well, let's pay for our license for existing software for 1 year out of it. I would recommend against it, but you're the council and you could tell me to do it. Okay. So that's the way that would work out. But this is where I came forward saying something new. We've never done it before. Let's try it.
Okay. Councilor Marks, then Leo, you have something? So
Thanks.
Sarah? Yeah.
Thanks. Clint, this might be sort of a follow-up question from Matt's, I'm not sure, but as we look at page 17 with, for example, the 2 new reserves that staff is recommending we create, which is the Emerald Ash Borer and the strategic development one. For me, that just sparked a question. There are others that have this listed also, but some of them say, a recommended balance of a certain amount. This one, for example, recommended balance 500,000, but at the moment, there's nothing in that fund at all. It's a new fund that would be being created. As we look, when we begin to see numbers from you for the FY26 actual budget, as opposed to the capital plan, should we be expecting to see in that budget a certain amount? I mean, these ones, for example, Emerald Ash Borer has a recommended annual contribution of 10,000. Are we expecting to see in our 26 budget everywhere that one of these reserves has a recommended annual contribution, that staff has built that into the budget that's going to be brought to us? Or are we expecting that those are not yet built into the budget we're about to see? How do these recommended annual contribution numbers tie into the budget that we're going to see? Does that make sense as a question?
Yep. So with Emerald Ash Borer, to give you the very specific answer, it came from staff with a recommendation. They wanted a $50,000 balance, and they felt if it was at $10,000 a year, it would be adequate to meet the needs for what that project's going to be entailing. So that's why I brought it forward. It's going to be coming forward in the budget as a request in that budget process. It may actually move to being an operating thing that the council just deems it not reserve worthy. But I wanted to identify them here. Strategic Development Reserve does not have an annual contribution because we didn't know what it would be, and it's going to be based upon capacity. But we did think that having a balance out there for strategic development reserves of $500,000 for projects that we want to see as a community occur isn't a bad idea. So and again, where did that recommended balance come from? Projects I've heard discussed, and we put some numbers to them here internally, kind of averaged them out, and I said, you know what? Let's round it up. Call it $500,000. We're not funding it this year. Actually, we are. I'm recommending $10,000 go into that one for fiscal year 26, but it's a transfer from another reserve in. It's not new tax dollars.
Skateboards are not strategic.
Yeah, skateboards are coming out.
Yeah.
And so so the ones that do list here, though, a recommended annual contribution, we should assume that when we see the budget, that will already be built into the FY26 budget that's presented to us. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think I can't tell you off the top of my head. I think there's one exception to that. And I think I took a break on one of them and said, we're not going to fund it this year. Just with everything else that was going on. And we'll see that as we keep going through.
Okay, I had one other short question, Dan.
Shoot, go ahead.
Which is just, also, so for example, like on the skate park where we're recommending that the council part of that be redesignated somewhere else since there's no motion happening on a skate park right now. And you said we would maybe as a council take a deeper dive into these reserves at some point in the future. I guess I'm just a little bit curious, like on that one, I had an idea that popped into my head of what to do with skate park money that might be closer to the idea of a skate park than the Emerald Ash Borer and strategic development. And I know now's not the appropriate time necessarily, but I guess I'm asking, when is the appropriate time to have those discussions? Is this like a next year? Because we're doing a lot this year for the first time. Totally understand that. I'm just curious, when are you thinking that more deep dive conversation would happen? Or is it appropriate for us to just email you those ideas as counselors, or what's appropriate to do on that?
Well, one, you can always email me because that's always an open avenue for you.
Yeah.
I always throw that out there. But as far as the actual, in the future, this is where we should be getting into these. But I think you're going to have a project over the next year to determine these definitions in a little bit better detail with staff. It may be something you designate to a special committee or the finance committee, or you make the council as a whole. But again, you have a lot of things in your work plan. This is where I'm queuing up stuff that you need to start thinking about because we need to start doing it. In a typical year, if you right now said, hey, you know what? Clint, skate park transfer, we don't like this. And if the other counselors in this room say, yeah, we don't want to transfer the skate park reserve out this year, leave it, do it a different way, we will change the capital plan to say that. That's what should happen
Oh.
tonight.
Okay. I don't have a
Okay.
problem with it being transferred out because we haven't seemed to move on it for a long time. I guess I was thinking of all the community conversation around lighting on the ice rink and thinking that that was something which should be more tied to skate park and recreation. And I might love a quote on how much does it cost us to fix that lighting or something if we're going to move that money, but that's me.
And that sounds like a budget item. So when we move this capital plan into the budget and you want to make changes like that I would do during the capital presentation of the budget.
Got it.
Yep.
Helpful to understand the process. Thank you.
Okay, Leo and then Matt.
Again, I guess I don't understand when is the right time, when's not the right time to ask these questions. So I'll throw it out there and ask it. Maybe it's not the right time. The Martin Park complex, at one point there was a project where we talked about like it wasn't a skate park, or maybe it was a skate park. I don't know. There was this big project and all this stuff. And so there's $50,000 in there. That, to my knowledge, is not something we are planning to entertain. I think that, in my view, went away. So I just wonder about transferring. And I'm sure Martin Park would take some money to do some drainage or an infield or something like that. But I do think that we should have a discussion about the use of that $50,000.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, Matt, you got a question?
Yeah. So I'm money dumb, so you can explain this to me later if this is not a good question. But like, if we do have interest that comes from these reserves that is greater than it is paying down debt, does that save more money than transferring to other, or is that just not a good use for it? I'm just curious, like, if you paid down some of the other debt quicker, can you even do that? And is it like,
We'd have to look at each of the individual debts, but yes, that's probably a possibility. We'd have to see what it is. I mean, as far as making your debt payment to do a 1-year reduction in property taxes, that's the line where it starts to get nervous to me. Why
do
are
I-
we, you're doing a 1-year savings, it's gonna be there and gone, but paying down the principal, most of them we can, certain borrowings you can't. Typically the Maine Municipal Bond Bank, you can't prepay. But some of the others you can, and would have to look into that and see which ones we'd want to do. But we probably have some debts retiring that we could say, let's take 100 grand and pay it off.
and then just a philosophical thing, that I like the strategic development reserve a great deal, and I want to know a little bit more about it, just because for my feeling going into the future, maybe not this time, but I would be very excited about putting a certain percentage of the budget aside for projects that stimulate growth, both in building houses and also building business. And I know that there are maybe opportunities coming where we would have to put in infrastructure for that to make that available. And I think this would be a good fund for that. That's me philosophically. And I don't know if, maybe not this year, but in future years, maybe I can talk to the counselors about that.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what this is for, if that's the kind of thing.
Strategic development.
Yeah. Like, say,
Okay.
let's put new power lines out somewhere or something, I don't know.
So, I'm a little concerned about,
Listening?
I'm a little concerned about revisiting things that we've talked about in past budgets as part of between now and,
Yep.
2 weeks from now, in terms of like, because we have talked about Martin Park and the investments. Like, for me, that's been backburnered because we haven't had the money, but I've been thinking about how we're adding money to the fund, and eventually it's going to be enough to do something pretty cool.
We really didn't have a conversation about that, to be candid. Not,
we-
not about the big project. We haven't, Dan. Since you've been here, I've been here. No, we haven't.
We've had
No,
there's schematics that I've seen about a bigger project, and there's some land there, and there's an opportunity there, and there's drainage problems there. It has been looked at. It hasn't been, but we did make, and I have to go back and, I don't know that I or staff have time to go back and look at it in the next 2 weeks, but we did, as I recall, put funding into the Martin Park last year as part of intentionally, when we started to do some more work around. So I just be concerned about just seeing this for the first time and then making a decision that we're gonna, like, if we vote to approve this on the 14th.
Yep.
Then, and the skateboard money gets moved automatically, that's not a separate vote?
Be orders for all of these, depending on, and that we will work out if the plan's approved, that will be part of the budget process. So there'd be an order moving skate park money if it makes it all the way through the budget process.
Okay,
But there's no plans to move any of the others unless referenced here.
okay,
And again, I think you got to look at this as at future years, as you need to start getting into these a little bit more. And again, before, like strategic development reserve, don't create it till you believe to the concept and you know what you want to plan and save for. So you got to kind of have good planning.
okay.
So
So
to
we can
that,
accept the capital improvement plan in 2 weeks.
Yep.
And not, zero out all these, zero stuff out.
Correct.
And we'll have
We're going to
separate.
do no orders with the adoption of a capital improvement plan. None.
Okay.
There are going to be things that will be moving into the budget and you do orders at the end of your budget. And those will be queued up for when you adopt the budget. And so again, a good example for that would be an order on the skate park. If it makes it all the way through and we want to
Yeah.
transfer those funds, there would be an order by the council to
Perfect.
transfer it.
And we'll get the presentation from the different departments, so we'll have that information in front of us or recent before
Correct.
we make those kinds of.
So
Yeah.
guess I'm under the impression that when we are approving this, that we are saying, yeah, we want a strategic development reserve, but I think you just said that's not, you said don't, what
No.
did you just say?
I
That's
said
not
when
what's
you
going to happen.
create it, so we're recommending it and I've given you a goal and a purpose. And we're asking for 10,000 to be moved in. When you go to the budget process, if you like the reserve, you can keep the reserve. You can just say, don't move the 10 grand in this year. Or you could tell me today, we don't want a strategic development reserve. Clint, take it out.
Well-
This council is not interested at all in strategic development reserves.
Right.
And we'll
And
take it out.
so that today is the day to do that, but we're not really going to have it. I mean, this whole meeting is not set up to have in-depth discussions is what I kind of keep getting the drift of. So I don't,
This,
I'm
again,
not
this
really comfortable
year
with the
is
whole
not
thing.
set up for what you should do. This is a year of bridging you from having minimal research, minimal planning, to having very deep dives into what you can do and why and what you own. And we got to start figuring out what to do. And that is a big, big project. This capital improvement plan in and of itself took a month more than I estimated. It's because you need to do more in advance to get ready for what you should or could be doing. And this council hasn't set those policy initiatives. You've been working on other things. That's not a fault. That's a good thing. This is a lower priority. So I think to reiterate what Dan's saying, don't get derailed with a major project on what to do with your reserves right now. Come out the other side of a capital improvement plan, figure out what you're going to do in the next year and start working that into your things you want to do as a council and say, it's time for us to work into these a little bit further. Staff's done our best job based upon what we knew of your goals, but it's also as best we could tell. They're here. I don't know what council put money into Martin Park or put what it did, but it's there. So somebody at some point said this should be done.
Mhm.
So we're saying that's a goal, whether it predates this council or not, it's there. Reassessing whether that's still a good goal, I can't do that in this 1-2 month process.
Right.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Um,
Jacob?
Well, finish Leo.
Yeah,
It's-
okay.
yeah, can I just ask on the page 13, the Public Works Capital Infrastructure Reserve, 0 is the current balance of that?
No, zero is the current unencumbered. You spent it, you encumbered it all last year. You said spend it all. You've listed off all the projects from last year that took it all the way to zero.
Right.
So there's nothing left.
Yeah, so I don't, that seems like a precarious position to me, but I don't really read anything in
Well, when
here.
you see the 26 budget, I'm asking money be put back in. So I've got suggestions on how you could put things into reserves for capital infrastructure.
And on the same page, Total 290 is designated for the following. Are those all brand new reserve accounts?
Those are detailed lists of items within one large reserve. On page 13,
Yes.
so you're looking at like, which one?
Oh, no, it says that,
Mini
of
front
the,
end loader?
of the total, 290 is designated in the following areas. Gotcha. Okay, so the total is 444.
So what we're doing is we're creating subcategories so we know what we put them in there for and the
Are-
purpose.
And are those just being created in this plan? Or were those
Uh,
already there? All of
Those are
them?
their current balances. Reserves are your balances, unencumbered.
Okay, so those were
This
already
isn't
there.
what we're putting into it this year. This is
Got
what
it.
sits
No,
in it today.
Understood. And those were already accounts that were there.
Yeah.
then. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay. We'll move on from reserves to the next section.
Inventory, this is pretty simple. I don't
Hold on
want
a
to talk a
second.
lot.
I think Jacob's got one more question.
Yeah, just again, process. So 2 weeks from now, we're accepting this. And so will these recommendations carry through to the budget? So for example, old fire station, 112803, balance of $11,000. In parentheses, you've got consider transfer to 1129. The budget that's presented to us will actually include that transfer.
It would be an order that would be at the end, yes.
But it will, okay. And then, the other reserves recommend to fund at 1/5 of
Yep.
such and such, that will be included in the
Again, if
budget
it's mentioned in the
process.
FY 26,
That is going to happen.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, inventory, is that what we're on now?
Yeah, inventory.
Inventory starts on page 19.
Yeah, I thought it would be helpful for you to start to understand what you own, to understand what we're saving money for. So that's abbreviated inventory of all our roads, all our cars, all our equipment, all our, everything. The only thing, sewer, I moved that, your clay line discussion in later, but talks about your number of miles of sidewalks, number of miles of storm drainage. Why does it take so much to maintain what we own? Because you own a lot. And again, we'll start explaining why you own so much and what it costs to maintain it. But again, you don't build the sidewalk and then forget about it. It will need to be repaved at some point. Is that 10, 15 years? No, people walk on it, but it's not 50 to 100 years either. You got to go back and maintain it because once it's filled with potholes, it becomes a walking hazard and you want to fix that.
Sewer pipe's the only thing that lasts 100 years around here, right, Chris? Another one, thank you.
I think we got one at 104, but who's counting? But that's it. That's the inventory. I wanted you to see your inventory.
Quick question. It says 89 miles of paved road, and then on page 23 and page 40, it says like 42 miles.
I
Is
think it
that
says 89 miles of lane miles. If you see that
paved
clarification.
mile, it says 89 miles of 89 paved miles of road.
I was supposed to say lane. It's 89 lane miles. We wanted to show the difference because those terms are shared about. You have 89 lane miles. So like on Stillwater, you have 3-4 lanes. It's only a mile of road, but it's 4 lanes wide. So it's bigger, wider. You need to know that. So we got 89 lane miles.
So and then it says we've got 42 on the other
Miles,
page,
center line.
center line.
That the
Center
yellow
line,
stripe down
just
the middle.
9 miles. Double? More than double?
Well, again,
Yeah,
it would be
sorry,
double
on
because
two
at the
sides.
beginning, it has to be, there's 2 sides of a road. So you're going to start at 84. Yep. So
So
there's 5 extra miles of,
we all, under buildings, we also have the old Public Works building, right?
oh, did I forget Penobscot Street? Yep. So lane miles, Penobscot Street. We talk about it all the time. and We forgot it in
I
here.
know.
Yep.
Sell it, you say, and then, you already sell it without telling us, or?
Ah, shit. No big deal.
Yeah, yeah. Finance
kidding.
committee chair is okay with it.
Okay.
How much
It's-
land? How much land do we own? Do we have that?
So we're working on that one.
Okay.
That's become a little bit of a project. You may see something about that in your budget.
Okay,
Okay. We're working on land.
thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else on the inventory,
Nope, not for me. Anything from you?
counselors? What is it different? So what's our liability on the state road versus a municipal road?
So you're in the compact, so you're plowing them,
Yeah,
but constructions, you can usually plan on a state road being a 50% contribution for a major project
okay,
or surface treatment, typically.
okay.
In like where they just resurfaced Park Street seemed like we just learned about that like the week before they were going to do it this fall. I think it was this fall.
Maintenance service treatment you usually don't have a share of. That's the MST mix. That's the shim and go.
They do it.
Backs will see those as well, but a lot of times those aren't on ours. It's more of your project specific. They're going to dig it up and fix things, and it runs through backs, and they'll come in and ask for an allocation, and backs tells us. So good examples, the traffic lights over on Stillwater. That's 130,000 in the fiscal year 26 plan. That's because we have a match. That's a state shared project. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna move on to TIFs. And so it's 6 o'clock now. We're gonna
Yep.
plan on a 7 o'clock meeting. How do you think we're doing?
Not too bad. I want to get to the fiscal year 26. The TIF's going to be easy as well.
Okay. we'll
Because
see.
what I'd like you to do is in the appendix is where you start with a TIF overview. This is the key. I wanted you to understand what you had.
And this starts on page 24.
Yes. So it tells you the name of it, when it was created, when it will end, what you're supposed to do with it in summary. Are there any credit enhancement agreements and how many years are left? So again, credit enhancement agreements. I want to make sure this term's really well understood. That's a contract you sign with a business inside of a TIF district to give them back a portion of the taxes that property generates. The rest of those property taxes go into a reserve fund for TIFs. That reserve fund has to be used for the purpose that's listed there. And so when you go into your attachments, let me get that at the right spot. In your appendices, there is this document. I'm going to scroll down right here.
What page number is that?
Appendix D, page, oh, shoot. I love Google. I took it to the right page, but I didn't click on it. Yes, I picked on Google again. Where was it? Appendix D. Come on. Right there. Come on. So that is page 58.
58. Thanks.
Yep. So these are estimates. The balance, really accurate. What it's going to do going forward is a moving target. Your mill rate changes, the value of the property changes, the amount of money it creates changes. So I can't tell you what it will be. I can tell you based upon today's dollars, what we think it will be. So the downtown TIF has $996,000 in the bank. It will generate 191 more this year for the downtown TIF. And then because the rest was encumbered to other stuff. And then going forward, we expect it to be around 325 to 305 a year. As you keep going down, you'll see the different dollar amounts on the different ones and what they're doing. So just wanted to get you an understanding. You generate.
These aren't the same ones that are in our document, I don't think, Clint.
They are the exact same ones. They might be some verbiage word difference, but these are the same ones because there is 7 here and 7 in the
I know.
top.
Well, I got on my document that I downloaded, I've got this document, but instead of the 999,000
Mhm.
under the downtown TIF for FY24 balance, I have 621,000.
Where did you see that? 621.
It's in
Where'd you find 621?
It's in the whatever document whatever, I think it was what Amanda shared with us by email. Did it get updated since that first email came out? Or am I on the wrong? Nope,
might-
I was on the wrong 50. Nope, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, 60. You should come
I
see
got it
me on
now.
those.
No, I got it now. Yep,
Okay.
you're right. 58.
Yep.
Looks an awful lot like 59.
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, they look a lot. They're a lot of information, but we did again,
Okay,
erring
sorry.
on the side of too much information. We gave you everything we could. So again, as we work towards this, I have recommendations from the staff of what we should be doing with our downtown TIFs for now. Longer term, we should probably look at these even more deeply, just like you should look at your reserves. But again, is this the time and is this the place? No, you have set rules in place for all your TIFs. We know what to do with them as a staff, and we're managing them consistent with those plans. It's just about, do we take the bigger, broader vision? So for example, the downtown TIF, and we're doing more research on this, will generate enough money to be the 10% match of Route 2. We believe it meets the definition. We're confirming that, but that's what's in this year's plan. Use $3 million that will be generated by that TIF to be your match of Route 2. You would never have to raise a single dollar of taxes for your residences to pay for that entire project.
Is that one approved already? I wasn't sure.
That one will be getting updates soon, but that's the suggestion from staff. We think that's an easy way for now to plan it. Will we do that the year we do it? I mean, it's a plan.
Yeah.
You know, until you write it down, you have none.
Yep. I like
Clint,
what
can
you
I
said.
ask a question about that downtown TIF?
Mhm.
Dan, are we at that point or are you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
John,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to ask, so that was helpful. I wasn't sure if that TIF amount was coming just from the downtown TIF, the $3 million match, or from all the TIFs. So that's the downtown TIF. And what year is staff projecting that we would need to make that match? I know that's a moving target, been all over the place, but as you're making these projections and saying we think that the downtown TIF will have that amount saved up by then, what is then? What date are we aiming for?
to be determined, I said, and again, it's in a 3 to 5 year window. Let me make sure. Yep, 3 to 5 year window, but it's a guess.
But
That's all we can give you
which 3 to 5 year window?
from today.
Okay.
3 to 5 years from today.
Okay. So like if we're looking at 3 years from today, we'd be looking at how much would have been saved up in FY 28?
From that perspective, well, you would look at, so 25's done as of June
Yeah.
30th. That will be added.
Right.
26 is what we expect to be added next year. So every June, those dollar amounts would be transferred in.
Okay. So
Yep.
like by those dollar amounts by FY 28, we'd be at around 2 million something saved up, whereas by FY 30, we would be closer to the full 3. Is that what I'm looking at across there?
Yep. And you'd probably have to do a bond anticipation or
Yeah.
revenue anticipation, or you
Sure.
would borrow from your own TIFs to refund them for the other projects. But again, we'll cross that bridge when we know a date on Route 2.
Sure. And I have one other question on this page, which is just, so I understand that the FY 24 numbers are current balance, which is very different and doesn't compare to any of the others, which are sort of income coming in on any given year from these TIFs.
Yep.
The FY 25 column, which looks significantly lower than, at least on the downtown TIF, than the other ones across. And I think also when we look at the bottom line, that's reflected totals. Just for my understanding, that's because some of that downtown TIF has been encumbered to be used somewhere else, and so we've spent part of it this year elsewhere. Is
Yeah, I
that
don't know
correct?
Yeah, I don't know what, yeah, Mitch, you want to come up and tell them what we spent downtown TIF on this year? I don't know that one off the top of my head yet.
I don't need to know. I just want to be sure I'm understanding
Yeah.
that drop is just because FY 25 council designated some of that money to go somewhere else in this year's budget. But looking forward, you would not be designating any of the money to go elsewhere except to be saved up potentially. Is that correct? For this Route
Yes.
2 project?
Yes, there was
Okay.
the biggest difference in this year was a $90,000 in the downtown TIF that went to wastewater to design part of the design of the Route 2 wastewater upgrades.
Yep.
Okay. And then the only other drop I see comes like in FY 31, and that looks like some TIFs must be expiring. Is that correct? I'm looking at like
Yes.
EnvisionNet must be expiring. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Stuff. All right. Anything else on TIFs?
Yeah.
Jacob?
What's the difference between TIF annual amount available and TIF annual income? Page
Which-
58 and 59.
58, 59. I think that's when we're showing you. So the annual income is what it's generating. Annual amount available is what we don't, so what was encumbered for other projects. If you look at fiscal year, the annual income, $1 million in the downtown TIF. But you have credit enhancement agreements, you've transferred to operating budgets. So that's what it will bring in. You just already said that these are the things we're supposed to be doing with it.
So we get $1 million in tax revenue from the downtown TIF.
Yep.
But we've already allocated approximately 700,000 of that for
Yep, which would be, it could be anything from a credit
everything else.
Yep,
Okay.
debt service payments, you name it. Yep. That's what you've already encumbered. That's why we showed the two.
So, and do we know what is the balance of that TIF like? Because it says that we're putting, of this 211 was used for the credit enhancement, 831 went to budgeted items, 293 is held in the TIF balances to be used for future projects. How much is that, and is it on 58? Is that on 58 or 57? What is the total TIF balance?
The total TIF balance is the amount that's in the bank right now. So that's why we said in the,
No, but what is that amount? That's what I'm asking.
that's the one that's on page 58.
58.
Let me get the right one, right here. Fiscal year 24 balances. It's in yellow.
So 1.6 million?
996,000 in the downtown TIF, 1.6 of all TIFs is what we have in the bank.
We see that again. 1.6, that's the balance
Of all TIFs.
of all. Okay,
That's what's in the bank today,
not encumbered
not
in
encumbered,
this year,
sitting there,
in this year's budget. And
available
then-
for
so-
appropriation.
So then at fiscal year 25, it's, the balance is 293.
That's the 1 year amount.
Okay, so that is the unencumbered amount that theoretically gets added to the 1.6?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
That wasn't
Yep.
clear, so, or to me, I'm not saying it wasn't clear.
A lot of information to share. There's a lot of different ways we could total it. We tried to go simple.
I know,
Yep.
that's the
Yep.
challenge.
Nope, that's fine.
On 24 plan recommendations, recent audits have indicated no reliance on TIF for revenue operations. I know we've been 1.1, we've been, and
Yeah, you
now
were
last time we were
9 something
nine,
last year.
9 something.
Yep.
You're recommending 648, we're gonna make up that 300,000 somewhere.
That the number we're at, that's a budget call question.
This,
more
this
than-
says it's recommending 648.
What-
So that's gonna shift about 330,000 to operating.
Correct.
So,
And we're working on that in the operating budget.
okay.
Yep.
It seems like that'll be a tough gig. I know TIP funds are very regulated, so I mean, do we have to do that basically?
Been recommended by your auditor. I would say you
No.
you don't have to, but you really
Yeah,
should
but we can,
try.
and we can only spend them on certain things, obviously. I know
Yep.
in the past, we like a big portion of maybe even the town manager, assistant manager, and all that stuff was, we did. So I can understand why that's being said. Now, whether we can do it or can't do it, but
We're going to show
but-
you a budget that tries to do that.
tries
is
to
what
do
we're
that.
saying.
All right,
Yep.
that's what you're saying. Got it.
Clint?
Yep. You go ahead, Sarah.
Just one quick follow-up to that. This seems like a safe assumption. You guys are so thorough and this has been so well organized, but I just want to sort of verbalize out loud and be sure I'm understanding. I'm assuming that that's audit thing is about how much TIF we're using toward operating expenses and does not come into play at all about saving up TIF money to, for example, pay our 3 million on the Route 2 project, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just back to this page on 58. So the 293 you're just kind of guessing that we might still be somewhere in the 650 or something range that's going to operating? You're not.
For
in
fiscal
these
year
future
20
years, for you to come up with these totals, you've got some number in mind that we're using of the TIF towards operating, presumably.
So as you see, there's about $147,000 difference between 25 and 26.
Yeah.
That would be going in. That's based upon mill rate increases and less use.
Using less.
Yeah, so we're
Okay.
mitigating it as much as you can, and
I see.
it's gonna be an interesting one to explain. We're gonna do an entire departmental budget in the operating budget on TIFs to try to explain this so you can understand, because it is an expense and it is a revenue at the same time.
Yeah.
It's an expense of yourself and a revenue to yourself to lower costs in other departments.
And one more quick one. What does 100% captured mean? Where you say
Where do you
30
see
year-
that?
It's term end date, 30 years, 6/30 to 2030. They all just says 100% captured. What does that mean? That we've captured all the revenue? We're done? Do you know what that means? On page 25.
Oh, back there, okay. I will tell you in a second. We probably could do more with definitions in here because there are so many different ones, but we tried to do our best.
This is a great document. So
25. One, yeah, 100% captured means, okay, so that's when you create a TIF district, you can say how much of it you want to capture. Do you want all the new value being created or just half of it? I've never seen many towns that don't capture all of it because it's in your best interest to capture it all. But for example, when you did Deergo Pines, which is called, which one is that?
Third one down.
Third one down. 70% capture, 30% and 70%. You chose not to capture 100% of that value and you left 70% to the operating taxes and you only captured 30% of the new value it created. So it's a third of what is normal. Gets tricky, but so basically if you have some land, it's worth 100 grand.
I get it.
You create a TIF district and it's now worth 5.1 million. That's 5 million of new captured value you could have. Typical is to do 100% because then it doesn't get counted into any of your formulas for revenue sharing, school subsidy, etc.
100% into the TIF.
100% into the TIF.
Yeah.
This one decided they'd only put 30% in and let 70% go back to the general fund to offset operating taxes.
Like regular taxes.
So
Which is what will happen when, like, in 5 years with the,
when they
you know, when they
expire,
expire, it is,
100% goes into
it's going
property
to go
taxes,
back into our property taxes, which will have impacts that we.
which is why you
good
like
and
the
bad.
ladder.
It's not good for, which is a negative impact on our cost share.
But again,
when
you
that
remember, you're
happens.
always entitled to 5% of your total value can be in a TIF district. So you should keep pursuing more TIFs.
Right.
To keep growing your community in the way that's consistent with your comp plan.
Yeah.
Give a little comp plan plug.
Yeah, nice. I like how you worked that in.
Yeah.
Smooth,
Okay.
smooth. All right, moving on from TIFs, right?
Okay, so now we're getting, what are we on time?
6:14.
Okay, we're about to dive in. So WPCF, this one we're gonna do on
What
its
page are
own.
we on?
Page 27, yep. So this is all rates, and this could be a huge detractor. This is a recommendation. We could go around and around, but this is the budget recommendation that we would take forward. They have given me a list of $6,430,600 worth of stuff that should be accomplished in approximately the next 10 years. Good timing. Their current bond is got 10 years left. So what we did is we backloaded a 20-year debt schedule to bond every 10 years for wastewater and said, what would we do every 10 years? So this means every 10 years, you're gonna have about $6 million of debt capacity. That's what and that's the plan, to run a 20-year capital plan on wastewater, knowing that every 10 years you make major investments. So when you look at this, the two biggies are need a new sludge press, and that does have operational savings, but those aren't fully calculated out in detail here because it's based upon the amount of tonnage of water that we're carrying over. But there is even some capital needs that we might not need the same equipment because we don't haul so much sludge, less hours because we might contract it out. There's a lot of different pieces. We got to make the commitment to the sludge press before we can get into the operating. The clay line on Main Street for $2 million was another big one. UV disinfection upgrade. That's the one that's funded in your reserves right now. We're calling forward for that to be implemented this year, which means probably fully done sometime next year, meaning summer of 26, fall of 26. Then we queued up a few others. The sewer line on Hillside and the Bennett Road capacity lines are considered very important. So we rolled them into this concept as well as a jetter flusher, pump station replacements, and the roof replacements, and the heating and disinfection at those. So there's still needs, and we need to go further into what they are. They also have 4 vehicles. We've stayed away from their vehicles because if we do the bond issuance that's recommended, what they're contributing to reserves will satisfy about $100,000 a year of other capital needs from their budget. So it could either go to reserves or pay for a truck or pay for a roof replacement or pay for some of those other items. So that's the way we outlined them to capitalize this. How do we pay for it? A rate increase. So it's premised on, and again, estimated, we need to go to a bond advisor to go through all this and get it really vetted out. But it was on our numbers, a 3-year, 5% increase, 5% a year for 3 years, 15% total. If you do that when we talk, and I want to stop there because this is what's going to get us into our fiscal year 26 actual plan. This is the narrative summarizing the policy or philosophy behind what's recommended in the numbers. I'd like to leave this and go into the fiscal year 26 municipal side and bring up that spreadsheet when you're ready, because I know there's a lot of questions here, and I think the spreadsheet shows it better than the narratives.
Makes sense.
Do we want to take just a small pause? I gave you the list of all the clay lines and how old, whoops, and that really rolled really quick, on how old they are, because I just, honestly, it just felt like it was a good place to have it. So if you ever asked it, I could tell you to go look at your capital plan.
I had a quick question on the clay lines.
Yep.
I just wanted to know, as part of all the work that we've already approved and funded to happen on Webster side, which hasn't, I don't think, begun yet, right? The sewer and water line work over there. Are these, are many of these clay pipes being replaced on Webster side already as part of that work? So Pierce,
Ones
Peters,
that-
Pond, Hillside, and Penobscot, all the ones at the bottom, those are all Webster side streets, starting at Pierce down. Do we know if these clay pipes are already getting replaced as part of that work that's funded? And if not, when it's ripped up, should we be? I don't know, I'm just curious.
So the way this works is these are the clay lines that we have today.
Right.
If you fix them, they will be gone. So, what's, and sewer, Chris, what's one of those streets we're going to do this summer?
Pierce, Peters.
Pearson Hillside.
Pierce and Hillside, not Pierce. I don't know. I don't think Pierce. I think it's Hillside and Pond, but I could be wrong.
I think pond is just surface water.
Yeah, I think it's just stormwater. But yes, the ones that will be done this summer would be removed for next year's capital plan.
Okay, but some of these are already on the schedule to be done as part of the Webster side project, at least one or two streets, correct?
Isn't
Yes.
it just Hillside? Because I think on Peters, we're just going through.
Yeah, I don't think it's
fixing a
Peters.
fixing a problem.
Easy, we don't have to vet this. We will update the
Okay.
capital plan to include which ones are scheduled for 26, 25, 26.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you.
do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Sewer, what is scheduled?
Take us to municipal
Yeah, so the municipal,
page.
I just started.
Sorry, I'm trying to follow along on.
You're on page 31.
Andrea knows too. You can tell us.
So we're going to start very high level. The 1-year plan is premised upon 1.66735 in annual taxes, $540,500 of money already in reserves being pulled out to buy things, predominantly in that one case, an ambulance, because you ordered it 2 years ago. It's being delivered this summer. So you got to pay for it, and it's in reserves to pay for it. Then TIF, we're recommending 3,130,000. 3 million's Route 2, which in what you should understand is you are dedicating yourselves or committing yourselves that that's your plan to hold 3 million in it. So it has a cost, if you will, but you haven't spent any money. It's not being spent this actual year. 130 for the traffic lights on Stillwater. Again, that may happen this year, but it may be delayed as much as a year because we don't have a schedule yet. But we put it in. And then the last piece is to put out a $13 million and $40,000 bond. We're not recommending you just do this. We're recommending you get a bond advisor in here and talk about it. That's about half wastewater, half municipal. And so when you go through this, we're going to bring up Appendix C here pretty quick, but I really like this chart, and there were some conversations coming in, and I hate, it won't do it. I can't get it to center. Come on, right here. It's about as center as I'm going to get. When you zoom in on this, traditionally, this is a bridge. You always look at capital equipment, capital infrastructure, capital facilities, and capital reserves. So what I did is I broke out how much money you put into each of those years. But at the bottom, this is the amount of money you put in property taxes towards your capital planning over the past 5 years with a 6th year proposed. Fiscal year 21. That was COVID. No one even knew what you were doing. So be careful of that number. But what I would contend here is we're going to start talking about some numbers, and I'm going to bring up some spreadsheets that are going to be confusing. But on capital equipment, if you take everything and you start digging into everything the staff gave us, there is a spreadsheet that I did that is not 100% accurate and defensible, but begins to show you the magnitude of the problem. And it is right. Appendix B, right? Let me see. Let me see if I get the right one. It's so big. Oh, no, it's not the one totals. Test sheet borrowing. There we go. Annualized cost. I did a hypothetical on what does it cost per year. So we took all the equipment that the staff told me they have to maintain, and I divided it by the number of years they expect it would last. Now, is it perfect? No. But if you go by the number of years, so for example, we have a paving machine. They expect it to last 20 years. Ours lasted longer, but a typical life of a paving machine is recommended at 20 years. So I took the cost this year and divided it by the number of years that we would need to save up to have an annualized cost. How much per year do we need to save to maintain all our current equipment? And again, as a rough number, it was
This-
$880,000.
Right.
Okay, but I didn't want to share. This is what's getting me into the math that made some of these recommendations come together. But these spreadsheets were too much. I was going to lose everybody and we would never have meaningful conversations. The next part of this is that when you get into the capital plan, I gotta go back to Google. And we're gonna go down to Public Works for just a second. We're gonna jump ahead just for a moment. If you
We don't have that $880,000 spreadsheet, do we?
You do not.
No.
Because it's too much. It's too messy. It's too disorganized. That's why I need software.
But haven't I
can't
seen
give
it?
it to you in a presentable format. But I will show you here in a second what you do have, and you could start to do the math on this, okay? Just let me walk through this in the order I planned. Okay, so the next one is if you go down to Public Works, besides equipment, you also have infrastructure. So with Public Works, I did a little hypothetical for everybody to understand how much infrastructure you have to maintain, not equipment, but roads, sidewalks, etc. So this is in here. We have a lot of different roads. I've talked to you about the road widths, but at the bottom of page 40, we have 225,000 feet of roads, feet. And if you run those at a typical road width, I use 24 for my purposes, but this would represent 725,000 square yards of road or 80,500 tons of pavement to pave them all with surface treatment. Just 2 inches of depth of pavement, just 2 inches of pavement on the top. Roads are usually built at 4. That's a road, and then you would put 1.5, 1.25 every so many years to maintain them. So I did some rough averaging. But if you put 2 inches of pavement on every mile of road, it is typical to assume that a road would get surfaced once every 10 years for high traffic. Real high traffic, that's probably not even enough, but low traffic, you might do 15, 16, like a side street, subdivision. That's just a rough schedule because we got to average very many unique different types of roads with different purposes into some general numbers. But if you were just to surface them at our current funding plan levels, which is right around $900,000, it will take you 11 years just to put surface treatment on them. That does not count storm drainage. That does not count sidewalks. That does not count any ditching, striping, bike paths, fencing, you name it. All the other things that go into roads, traffic lights. What else do we want to put on our roads? Street signs, speed limit signs. None of it's in there.
Speed tables.
Speed
Really
tables,
high speed tables.
not there. So again, what I'm showing you is that on an average maintenance schedule on your infrastructure, just for roads, wouldn't be bad to have about $900,000 a year going aside. The other one I showed you is about 900,000. We're at 1.8 million. We have not talked stormwater. We have not talked sewers. We have not talked buildings at all. We didn't have time to go that far. There's too much in here, but we're underfunded. And I mean, not in an egregious way, but in a way that if you were to say, what is your goal? Orono, I think, likes to maintain things well, but you have multiple reports that I've read since being your new manager that talk about needs in different buildings. I don't know if those are wants or needs, but there's a report that says things should be done. I'm in a building that the HVAC system is at its useful life. We know it's got issues, but it does still work. It's not like we got to go run out and replace it, but we haven't planned for it yet. And it's not in any of your capital plans because we aren't setting enough money aside in reserves. And we know we're maxing out our bond capacity. So as we're looking at all these, this is the complex, bigger picture of why I think we need to spend more money on capital investment reviewing software. We need to have, and it's not expensive, $12,000 a year. But it does a lot more than tell you what you're doing with your capital. It also tells you it'll help us build our budget books. So it'll get more uniform in what we're presenting out for information. So this is the big one. When you look at the policy recommendations, what this budget, this capital improvement plan was trying to show you is we do have a lot of needs and we're not ready yet to be fully organized and planning them all. You cannot walk home after this capital improvement plan this year and say, we did it. We've adequately planned for the future of Orono. We've taken the first step. towards capital planning for the town of Orono. So on top of this, what I'd like to shift into is that from all those different needs, we have all the policies that we've done for each department. If we go to the spreadsheet, that is Appendix C, this is what I'm bringing up right now. I can take you through it department by department and what we're recommending and why. This is the easiest place to see it, and for some reason, it's not showing up. I got to refresh, don't I?
Before we do that, I think, can we just pause for a second here?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the software makes, in my mind, probably makes very good sense, because this is complex stuff, and it's easy to get spun around on it for sure. And I think and just the overall, even trying to actually manage it via a spreadsheet is probably impossible. So I think just given that feedback, with this graph, I mean, there's a pretty big shift where we're going from a huge jump in capital equipment and a significant decrease in capital infrastructure, which I don't know. I mean, this is just tax revenue, so I don't know what that means. If there's grant monies and all, so we communicate a little bit back and forth about this is the tax, what we're paying with taxes. Seeing the whole picture, I think, is important to see whatever. But I mean, and I guess someone could make the case, well, look, we haven't invested in equipment, and that's why this shift. But I don't. You have to make that case, I think, because this represents a pretty big change and so what does that mean for the infrastructure? And as far as we're underinvested. I think I don't think you will ever hear anybody in any setting like this say, yeah, hey, looks like we invested too much. That just doesn't happen. It's always going to be, right, infinite needs with finite resources. So all of this, I mean, the plan's awesome, and I think it's a great building block. But there is, and to get tied to, well, every truck's 10 years, every road is 10 years. That's the big formula, but it's not the reality. Reality hits us every year. So I think not getting too tied to hey, we said it. It was in this plan, and you guys said, yeah, so we're doing it.
That's why we backed off from that, because
Yeah.
it didn't make sense for us this year to come at it that way. We ran some hypotheticals and just stopped. But yeah, I agreed 100%. The reason, so when you read the narratives, this is why I want to go the one by one. You did a lot of capital infrastructure last year. Staff's pretty maxed out. We got a couple big projects coming on this year. Webster side. You've also got the Colburn lighting project, and we got the projects we were going to do anyway. So the general consensus is to put some money into reserves for infrastructure, do a little less infrastructure this year to get caught up. And since we're doing less infrastructure, take advantage of some of the equipment that we are delaying and go after buying some equipment quicker. Let's do it this year. So as you go through it, I'd like to kind of hit to the Appendix C, which is the plan, the money that is supported by the narrative that's back in your budget, starting at page 31, 32. This is where it all gets, I explain it in words there, but this is where it is in numbers.
Can I ask you a question about the our municipal goal on the finance piece was long-term financial infrastructure planning, creating a 10-year financial plan.
Yep.
You just I'm a little worried you cut the knees out from under us a little bit just then. And I know I'm teasing you.
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Can't do it.
Can't do it.
1 year problem and the 5-year problem is too big. We can't even get to 10. We looked
Yeah.
30. I can show you in these spreadsheets. We went out, we did it.
Yeah.
It's not transparent. It
Yeah.
would be too confusing.
So what do we get? We buy the software and declare victory. I mean, we could do that and say we got
buy
the
the
software, so the
start
problem
entering it in and
solved.
see where we are.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got major steps with land, building, stormwater, to get into that system as well. So it's not like there's a lot more work. We're really heavy on equipment planning. We're good on road infrastructure planning, but it was based upon a number, not a need. You were doing $800,000 to $900,000 a year. Well, where did that number come from? I backed into it and said,
Yeah.
you know what? I can justify that's not a bad number. but it could be higher and it could definitely be lower.
Yeah.
You
So-
know, I just want to make sure this council knows that when you set a budget and you make those adopted, we've presented a capital plan that we think is fair.
Yeah.
We can meet our needs and it's not perfect by any means.
Yeah. I want to keep us talking about the fact that we have a goal.
Mhm.
And if we're going to come up short of that goal, I think I'm perfectly happy. It feels like we're going to make a lot of progress, a
Yep.
lot more progress than we would have made if we hadn't tried.
Yep.
And I just want to be transparent about, and then how we're going to continue to advance in that direction.
No, we did a 30-year look.
Yeah.
We got really good with a 10-year look forward. We brought it back to a decent 5-year plan that represented there. But even in the 5-year, I'd like to see our 5-year plan each year look like Appendix C.
Yep.
I'd like to see one of those for every single year. That's the level of detail I think we should be at. Because when you go, and I knew this might come out. So I pulled them out for the past 5 years.
Mhm.
You never stick to your plan. Okay? You have not. Sometimes you've gone out,
Which
not
that's,
many
that's,
times.
that's
but-
the reality hitting, plan, right?
Yeah. But again, the
Well-
reality is some of them are very odd. Like sometimes there's drastic changes. In 2023, you said next year you should spend 2.1 million. In that next year, oh, that's the good year. Sorry, that was the good year. You did 2.1. That was the one that you did it. Then in 2021, you said in 22 you should spend 2.9 and you did 1.6. And that's all capital. That's your full total budgets, right under the budgets that I've read from you. So you did a 1.3 cut. So you didn't even make it 1 year and then you did a major readjustment. So you've had 5-year plans. I think this is probably a better 5-year plan than you've had because the staff as a whole have dug into each other's departments and done it as a team. They were good plans in the past, but we're trying to get to a stable number. So that's why the goal for staff is to commit to property taxes at 1,667,000 for the next 5 years. That's stability that we think that can be maintained. And we took the first attempt in saying, this is how we recommend doing it in year one. I'm not going to lie to you. When we take this to the budget, I have every expectation you're going to cut the capital plan. I can't see why you wouldn't. We've got some tough years. You want stable taxes. You're probably going to cut things out of it. And you're going to ask me which ones can come out first. And I'll tell you which ones can come out first because we've had chats. Do we want them out? No, we think this is a really good plan. But there are things that'll probably get taken out and we're prepared to tell you which ones to start with. Would we take it all out and say put none back into reserves? No, I think what we would recommend is if we're taking 100 grand out, let's take 50 out, put 50 more into reserves. You still shrunk 50. Let's cut more, but leave more in reserves for next year because that's the way you're going to get yourself forward. If you don't start saving, we're never going to get to the point that you're putting more money into reserves. And that's where I think your miss is there's not enough going into reserves. But we need an independent reserve budget. And we just got them defined this year. So now we know what we're trying to do. We don't have an individual reserve budget yet either. Just bigger steps. There's a lot more to it. This is a big town.
And I do think it's a challenge. It's in theory, it's the best way to do it, right? Let's have a reserve for everything we need a reserve for. But again, in reality, you can't do that. And we also do and historically have paid for things from the yearly budget. So I mean, it's a good idea to plan and we're going to shift away from relying, we're trying to stabilize it so it doesn't go up and down each year, but we're used to getting $1 million more from the state. We're not getting $1 million more from the state. So when we come in and try to say, and now we're going to shift 300 more over from TIF. So I think it's going to be really challenging and it's, again, the best laid plans, and that's what we should be doing. But I'm leery of saying, and again, as I said that, and you said, well, you could say we didn't spend enough in the past, but this is the high watermark that where 1.6 of tax revenue is the high watermark.
High
For
watermark
capital.
for recent years, but I wouldn't say it's your high
Oh,
watermark.
I would almost guarantee it is. I doubt if we did spend higher taxes, pre 5 years ago. We maybe, and we can go look, but I mean, this last year, we spent 3.1 million on capital. And yes, and we drained our reserves and we, you know, we spent them down to nothing. So that, I would be real surprised if we'd done larger than that. But based on the past 4 years, this is the high water mark. And I think
Well, Leo,
that's
actually,
maybe. That's
No,
probably
so the
more
only,
aggressive.
yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think you know, we're right on track. I would say the only thing is that from a staff perspective, this is probably the most unbiased capital plan you'll ever see
yeah.
while we're here. Because in the sense that we don't have enough information and everything we did was based upon what were the needs and kind of trying to pull them forward. As we learn and grow and understand more, you'll see more of this is your opportunity. If we could do an extra 500,000 because an extra 500,000 came in, we're going to have recommendations. You'll be able to jump ahead a year or two and say, which one should we pull back? And we'll look at those years because each year would be itemized, what we buy in the years we're recommending. So that's kind of where we see the big win going forward. This year, you know, if there was an extra $1 million to spend, I don't know where, I'd probably tell you to put it right to reserves. Just put money in reserves because we need to, and figure which ones. I'd have to go sit with the staff, but you know, probably fire equipment because we got some trucks to buy, a ladder truck in particular. It'd be nice to be able to have $1 million to set aside for a ladder truck this year. I couldn't do it. So we didn't. You know, that's kind of where it kind of came back to that list. And you haven't been saving for it coming into this. So I made the policy, I affirmed the policy decision I thought I was interpreting. That since we're not setting a money aside for a ladder truck, we must have had every intent to bond for it because they're expensive. And we're looking at grants.
Yeah, I
Get
got you, Sarah.
grants.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Good, Sarah?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Clint. Really helpful. And Leo, I just wanted to point out that I'm not really sure it's fair to say that it's the high water mark because I did look at the numbers from 22, 23, 24, and 25 on that original graph page 32 and inflation adjust them. And when I inflation adjusted them, they're virtually equal to what's being asked for this year, all the way back, including FY22. So I think it's fair to say that it's really, this is not a, I mean, this is, if it's the high water mark, it's by some teeny amount of dollars. It's actually pretty consistent from FY22 into this FY26 ask once you inflation adjust.
Well, and Sarah, may I?
Yeah, please.
When you look at page 32, the other thing to look at is the COVID year. So I went back and you were doing well over $1 million in property taxes prior to COVID. It's just different budget formats, but they were over $1 million. And you did 343 that year. So it's a $700,000 to $800,000 reduction from normal.
Yeah, I didn't even count
Right
that
here.
year because that's
Oh,
clearly
shoot.
the COVID year. I only started at FY22, which is
But-
once the COVID year is over.
But
And that's
COVID, you took a break.
Yeah,
So you
Oh,
didn't
and-
do as much capital planning. When did you make it back up? I don't see it. You did
Right.
1.4 the next year, then you went back to $1 million, then 1.4. Past year, you got to 1.6. But if I could prove this, you've typically done, if you look at those 3 years and you go back a little further, you've been well over $1 million year to year in operating taxes. You got $1 million break in 21. When have you made up that $1 million loss? You didn't.
yeah.
So
I
that's
agree
kind of what the
entirely.
1.6, yeah, so that's where I'm kind of looking at this. You took $1 million break on your capital plan, and now we're sitting here saying, well, why do we still have some needs? We're behind a little.
Well, I mean, I have no idea what for projects weren't done or
We also had ARPA.
infrastructure. What's that? And we had ARPA funds, correct? So
Right.
that was the point of seeing the full picture, which this is just tax. So I think we don't have that. And in 23, it was $1,094,000, obviously. So,
Yep.
but valid point, Sarah. And if you throw out fiscal 21 and average 22 to 25, it's only 200,000 less, I think, taking the average. So it's not,
Yeah.
and
once
I
you-
didn't inflation.
I did inflation adjust them to the inflation index and they come out, we're really right on track, Leo, with what we've been doing. It's not a jump up. So
But before we end, I mean, you're 642.
Yeah.
The appendix C, so this is, I got to kind of just end it off with this. When you see when you look at this is by department, these are the things we want to do for this year. Some of them have different years. So for example, and one of the really weird ones in orange, the mini front end loader. There's $80,000 in 2026 available. But then it says 2027 over here. The last time we went out and looked, it was 87,000 to buy one. The thoughts are maybe we could do it if we put that much money aside and buy it this year, but we may not be able to. So we want to show you the flaws in what we're doing for planning. We're not there. Could we move an extra 10 grand in? We could, but this is where staff wanted to kind of create some opportunities and see where we could do some longer term planning. So this is also back to where you were, Leo. You said, why are we doing less infrastructure? I explained why, but then when you look down at the infrastructure, you will see capital infrastructure that we're setting aside, for example, 133,500 is for the Taylor Road base this year. No, where is it? Right there. Capital reserves, 110. Margin Street drainage, that's estimated at 330,000. We took it down to 110. So we've got it in this year's plan to put it in reserves. So although we're backing off a little infrastructure, we're maintaining the same level as last year in hopes that we can get some windows and opportunities going forward that if we had to have them more. There are still windows here this year. Which ones would we take out? I'm not going to say Margin Street drainage would be first, but if we have to cut for tax purposes when we move to the budget, it will be definitely one of the ones we'll look at. Rather than putting money in reserve for Margin Street, do we take a year? Do we take some money do we delay that mini loader and say we're going to put less money aside this year? This is where we got to get into the budget. But this capital plan, I don't even have a budget draft done. I can't even give you an estimate of what the taxes are going to be because I've been so much time's gone into this. We haven't got to the, to the other parts. So
when we next meeting, if we approve the capital plan, we're still going to have discussions about Appendix C.
100%.
When
Appendix C will
get there.
become your budget.
Which we'll still discuss.
Yep.
I'm a little confused on that Appendix C where it says reserves and ARPA 595. I mean, we obviously committed all of those and they're part of our budget for last year. I think we committed, and so we didn't spend it down because we didn't get to the stuff on Webster side, but it's confusing why we would see that again in the 26 budget.
Which one are you talking about?
Appendix C, the bottom of that, where it talks about.
Yeah, right there, right to your right.
This one?
Yeah.
So reserves and ARPA. You're using reserves money. We're also using ARPA to the tune of 90 grand this year to buy the ambulance.
Which we committed to in last year's budget, right?
Correct, but you haven't spent it yet. So I didn't want to not show it. This is the year you're going to spend it. You committed to the plan last year. This year, you're going to commit to paying the money out.
I get that. It's just.
Clint?
Ask that.
Question, Jacob?
Yeah. So, just can you real high level or not high level, walk us through those totals? Because like Leo, I'm not fully understanding it. So you were suggesting that we spend 1.6 this year
In operating taxes.
and then we'll have an additional 590 pulled out of reserves to fund what's up in this list.
Correct.
We'll have an additional, 325 coming out of the sewer again to fund the list above.
Yep.
Okay.
Jacob,
So of this, we really are truly spending 1.6 in new, or I guess I don't know how to ask that, but 1.6 in new obligations, and then an additional 590 in things that we've already approved, 325 in things we've already approved. So
Correct.
we're really okay.
Yeah, 325 is your UV disinfection. You're spending that to do it. So that's why we brought it forward. And that's why they're broken down in each of the narratives. This is why it's not easy, guys. You got a lot of capital needs and you got a lot of things you want to do and you want one plan. So we got to try to show you the numbers as succinctly as we can while also giving the detail.
And the going from year to year is also makes it very convoluted, I
Yep.
think.
Clint or Dan?
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're kind of in the
Not
late
trying to-
stages of the meeting where we just kind of.
No, sorry. I just wanted to, again, this page is really, really helpful, helped me tremendously. I know, Clint, I emailed with you a little bit. I found these totals really helpful once I understood them better, but I didn't at first. And I think part of what helped me was just to look down this line and realize that, some of these things are, I don't know if we have a name for the town budget that doesn't include WPCF, but general budget, I don't know, it'd be helpful if we had a name for, minus WPCF. Because like the first line, operating taxes, that's the amount that we're going to be taxing to the taxpayers in the coming year if we followed this proposal. And that amount would be going just to operations outside of WPCF, whereas the operating rate sewer would be going only to WPCF. Sewer reserves, again, would be going only to WPCF. Future rate sewer would be a potential increase, which again would go only to WPCF. When we get to reserves and ARPA, is that money going to WPCF as well as to the rest of the town, or is that only the rest of the town? Is that something you can break out that simply, or could you for us in the future? I know the bond number is mixed. That's, to the whole town as well as WPCF. It's helpful for me as I'm looking because I know we do budget all together, but WPCF has to be like fully self-supporting by, law. So,
When you look above, if it says reserves or ARPA, it has to be in column D. It has to tell you the reserve we're using. It
okay,
has to say expend it this year, and then that's the total we're gonna pay. So it's in reserves and we're gonna spend it. So another good example is we have 285 in town reserves for an ambulance. We're saying spend it.
Mhm.
We also have 90,000 in ARPA for that ambulance. We're saying
Right.
spend it. So reserves in ARPA, it must be a reserve or an ARPA in column D, and it must say expend in column E. It's tough because this
okay.
is what the challenge I gave to staff is what I lived this with you last year. I've tried to recreate it for you this year. There's too much going on in your capital and your reserves. You're over-informed and undersimplified. So we're trying to get this to a bridge of simplifying it so you can understand it better. I just don't know what to tell you. You got into the details so deep that it confused you, and it
No,
confuses me.
I think it's good. Everything in this capital plan, I'm finding very helpful and right at a good level. I just wanted to know if there was a simple answer on that one item at the bottom for reserves and ARPA, but I'll go up above and look if I need to find it out. I do have one other question on this page, which is just, I think it maybe relates to what Leo's already been talking about a bit. But so when I look, and I did look at the budget we passed last year in our budget binder, the one that was presented to us that we voted on. And so I do understand that, operating taxes, we're looking at this 1.66 amount, which is not at all, it's very similar to what came out of our operating expenses last year was also 1.66. But in reality, as Leo's pointed out, we did spend 3.4 million on capital expenses. And when I look at the budget, it looks to me like the difference in that is our capital revenues line, which I assume is the money we were taking out of reserves and ARPA. So I guess I would like to see, just to be sure that I'm clear, last year we had about 1.66 from the operating taxes, also about 1.6 from ARPA and reserves, which got us up close to that, 3.3. And when we see the next budget, will we have a similar comparison of that where we'll see, 1.6 million from operating taxes? And then are we expecting only this 590,000 from reserves and ARPA in what we get
Yes.
presented in the FY26 budget, or we're looking at a figure there that's pretty different than the 1.6 from reserves last year?
Correct.
Okay, so that is a change
again-
happening there. Yeah,
And we made the decision, because I came close to giving you the budget documents for your capital plan, in the capital plan. And I stopped short because I felt like it was going to confuse us further. So I said,
Yeah.
we gotta move that into the budget so that when you see it, and you will see forms, much like we're in last year's is the goal,
yeah,
that show you what we're doing this year compared to last year. But again, I can't say it enough. This is a bridge. We're starting to show
Yeah.
different ways to communicate the information and hope to build better understanding within the council and community.
I think it's an excellent bridge, and I just want to say thanks again. And I especially appreciated like the look ahead to the bonding and understanding what we might bond out. So I appreciated seeing a ladder figure and a library figure and a public safety building figure as tentative figures, to be working with. So really, to me, this was incredibly comprehensive. And although I hear Dan saying we didn't hit 10 years, this is more detail on 5 years than I've seen for sure. And I'm very, very appreciative between this and the software that Clint has suggested that would help us move into being able to make that 10-year plan. To me, this is a quantum leap forward, and I thank all staff for the incredible amount of work this must have been.
I'm pretty happy too. I'm just trying to set you all up for a lot of money for the Orono Festival days for the fall. But we're not going to deliver the 10-year plan, but we can have a hell of a festival in September. Of
Sounds like a
Priorities.
good policy. discussion for
Priorities.
council.
yeah, got to figure it out, right?
Just to clarify, we're not having a conversation, like the stuff, I am curious to hear about the things like Sailor Development overlay, and I thought I read somewhere about Margin Street not being pushed and stuff like that. That's going to come when we talk about the actual capital plan, not, I mean, it's in this.
Well, it's in here, and if you're good with this, I would like you to say, this looks good for a capital plan for fiscal year 26. This would be what would go on file and on record, and then we would take this Appendix C and start crafting your budget documents using that as your first draft budget for capital. That's what would happen.
I'm uneasy. I'm uneasy the way we keep talking about this. I think we're still going to have a discussion
Yes.
about all this stuff.
Yes.
You're saying generally this is, go. I feel like we're saying, sure, but then let's talk about it. So I
It's
don't know
really
what we're
uncomfortable
approving.
to have a plan and not know if you can afford it. And I'm asking you and telling you, you need to be extremely uncomfortable because your best plans should not be based upon what you can afford for capital. It should be based upon what we needs are. Staff brought forward our best recommendation of needs.
I just want
You
us
may
to
not
keep
be able to
remembering
afford it,
this.
and you will deal with that in the budget.
Okay. That makes sense.
Because, and I'm going to tell you, my evaluation of last year, the capital plan you approved last year, as high as it was, I think you felt was more than you needed. And I'm telling you, as I sit here today, it was less than you needed. If you want to take care of everything when it needs to be done. I know we can't afford that. No town has a capital plan that does it perfectly. If you show me one, I want to work there. This is normal. But what I want to say is that you got to get used to the normal conversation. You are always going to be underfunding your capital needs. So you got to set priorities and figure out which ones are there. This is staff's recommendation. We think it's a good starting point. We'd like to start the budget off with this starting point. This is the question that I was ending tonight with. Are you okay? So can we bring this back on the 14th to say we've decided on a good starting point? We like where we're headed.
Others?
So I guess to Leo's point, I also don't love the full amount, and I also don't understand the process that we're okay with this, but yet we're not approving it, but we still are approving it. So I think as part of the budget process, I would like an explanation of what some of these specifically big ticket items are. I mean, sailor development overlay, $250,000. I don't know what that is, what that money's going towards. Taylor Road base preservation. Again, I would like more explanation as to what some of these big ticket items that we're spending money are before we actually spend the money on them.
Yeah. Are you more comfortable with the term accept the plan and with the understanding that, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of it as we do the budget? I mean, as we do the
Yeah, I
annual
guess
annual budget.
my concern, and now that I'm a year in, I've seen this seems like an instance where we say we approve, we accept, etc., but then when it comes time to talk about the budget and Leo brings up, should we cut here, should we cut there, the conversation turns to, well, we already proved this, there's not a lot we can do. So I want to make sure that whatever we do 2 weeks from now, we are not setting this in stone. There still will be time to discuss whether we need all of this.
Is this more like these are all the things that we think is important for us to discuss in the budget in detail, and we're thinking of, okay, this is the the stuff that we are going to have to grapple with in the budget. Is that what we're approving? Like, and we're not kind of to some extent not approving, but saying this is the stuff that we are agreeing to get into detail and depth with.
Yeah.
Is,
That's,
Well, you also got to think
that
too, is put
it?
yourself 6 years from now and someone will see the copy of a plan that you accepted of what you thought we should be doing to fund the town. And then they'll see what actually gets approved in the budget and be able to compare and know what went in and what went out and why. Whereas in the past, you go through your budget. Last year, you changed the capital plan at the one of the very last meetings and moved some stuff around. Well, unless you have all the versions of the budget, you don't know that. And so this gives you a plan based upon needs. And that's kind of what I was hoping we would see as the big benefit here is that we're beginning to see the need to plan for Orono for the long term, everything that it could do and needs to do. And developing that plan on based, again, on what you can afford in a general theory, but then taking it to a budget, knowing that the annual budgets, you may lose or gain revenue year to year that we just can't forecast. So it's take the plan and saying we can't afford the plan and we're going to shrink it. Or you know what, we can afford more this year and we can afford more. So when you're at the end of the budget, let's put more in reserves. And where should we put it?
well, it
Mm.
creates some accountability and direction,
Yeah.
longer term, longer than budget to budget, which I think
Yeah.
is helpful.
I'm gonna go with your terminology there, that we are agreeing that this is a starting point. I think that covers it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that works.
We'll work that into a resolve that I'll kick out to Dan and Sarah and leadership planning to get a good resolve.
Yeah. And I want to say, I talked about the 10-year thing too, and I want to make it clear, Clint, to you and your team that, council will own its goals and, we will be, you know what I mean? I don't want to in any way give the suggestion there's a bus to be throwing people under on this thing. I just want to say that we'll be transparent with the community when we talk about what it was that, we set a goal and what it was that kept us short of that. And, it'll be a council,
Mhm.
it won't be a staff spotlight. It'll be from the council's perspective. So,
And
Can I
I
ask-
definitely want to can I just reiterate that I know I'm always the pain in the butt asking the questions, but I think this is an awesome document. I think the software piece will make this easier, because even this, it's 40, 50 pages. You get through it and you got to go back and maybe that's just the nature of the beast, but I think it's phenomenal, and I think it's an awesome start. And I know you guys did the whole staff put a ton of work into this, so I'm fully appreciative of all of that. And I think it's a great starting point, and it's helpful to have all of this. I do feel like in the past, if you dig into the budget and you dig into those spreadsheets and that little tiny print on the roads and things like that, I feel like Public Works did have a lot of this stuff out there, probably less so on the facilities and the buildings. But putting it in a consumable format is key. And ultimately, if we should be thinking about getting this to a 2 or 3 pager, so we can, for transparency, that someone actually might read, because there's no one in the community is going to.
Yeah, Belinda
there's
did.
one person in the community that's going to actually read through all of this. So, I mean, and that's not, again, not criticizing at all, just to
And that's
think
why we went to-
realistically about who's going to look at what and how this boils down to 2 or 3 pages. No idea, but maybe a software does sort of present that like that, or
all right,
chat GPT.
Sarah?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to also just reiterate that I think this is an incredibly useful place that we're starting from this year, and does provide that kind of accountability Clint brought up for changes that we may make throughout the budget process. And I hear Leo's term of starting, and a part of the way I think of it also, Leo, is that we're sort of saying to staff, okay, bring us the budget that has this capital stuff in it, and then we talk about that budget. But it gives them guidance to be like, yes, that's a good starting place for the capital side that's coming to us. And it's on record somewhere what we started from easily for us to be able to look at as we have our budget discussions. And I agree, a lot of it was always here, but this is just very condensed and organized, and I think really a great starting place. I also appreciated Clint's comment about, how money goes up and down. And one thing I really appreciate about this 5-year plan, and if it turns into a 10-year plan, one of our more volatile sources of income is our state revenue sharing that we have little to no control over at all about what happens with that money. And I love the idea that, yes, there may be a year where we look and we go, we can't fund what we wished we could fund this year. Money is too tight. But there might be a year in the future again where our money revenue sharing from the state goes up in a significant chunk. And when it does, I hope as a council or future council would look back at this document and say, our state revenue sharing money just went up, and this is our chance to catch up on capital projects that, we might have fallen behind on when money was tighter. So I'm very appreciative of the comprehensive look here, and I think it gives us the ability as we budget each year and deal with fluctuating income to go back to this and measure where we're doing and where we've fallen behind and where we might need to catch up. So I'm very appreciative of it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
I just thank you. It was very readable. And then the one thing that I appreciate is that what we're putting in front of us is these huge ticket items that we know are coming down the pipeline right up front. And so we have that in mind and how to plan for it in 5 years. And that was one thing that I struggled with last year, probably partly my own thing. So thank you for that. And I'm glad that we have this discussion up front and it's clear. And thank you, staff, for all the hard work.
Okay, anyone else? Clint, do you have any closing?
I think you guys are all over it. This is a lot of work left. Let's get into the budget and kind of figure out what we got to move around and why. Yep.
Okay. Do we,
So I'm bringing this back with some little bit of information. I took like 4 or 5 notes. I might do what I call a supplement to the appendix based upon what you brought up today. And that will come back with a final capital plan with a supplement based on some things we can answer for you.
okay,
And then that would be presented on the 14th. Reminder to you guys, I'm not here the 14th.
what?
Okay.
You're not gonna be here?
Yes, we can get a lot done on the 14th.
Yeah. All right, so is Mitch gonna run the meeting for us?
Mitch will be here.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your work. And thank you to staff for all your work. Zach, appreciate it. And I guess that we don't need to vote to close. Thank you, Sarah. And I'll make sure Rob gets an update and can watch the meeting. So
Adjourned at what? 7:05.
7:05.
You can declare us up.
I'm gonna play some Mark Park, so be ready. Yeah.
Play pipe.
I don't know yet, but I got